pick up where we left off. There's also this skill, this human skill of emotional intelligence, which is something that I have a feeling a lot of us have heard about. Oh, now it's not going to let me forward. There we go. A lot of us have heard about, but I want to kind of go just a moment, just kind of a level deeper into emotional intelligence and talk about it and make sure that we're all kind of on the same level of understanding about what it is, because I do refer to it specifically throughout my book and throughout this presentation today. So emotional intelligence, according to the Institute of Health and Human Potential, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and recognize, understand, and influence the emotion of others. And according to Daniel Goleman, who is a scientist, psychologist, and really one of the key founders and developers of emotional intelligence, has said that it breaks down into 4 main components. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And that within those components are different things that I bet we've all heard of, things like empathy, things like self-awareness, influence, coaching and mentoring, conflict management, teamwork, things that really are essential to how we as product people do our jobs. And when I think about emotional intelligence and other human skills that I've listed, like resilience and creativity and adaptability, and our technical skills, in my mind, they're really intrinsic, they're tied together. You can't have one without the other, right? Building a roadmap is not just how you, is not just kind of the tool that you identify to use it, the software that you're going to use, the format. It's not just that. It's having self-awareness to be able to raise your hand and say like, all right, maybe the thing I'm pressing for in the roadmap is out of my own best interest versus the best interest of my team or my organization or the customer. It's about having those influencing skills to bring those really challenging stakeholders with you on your vision to what the roadmap should be. It's about having leadership skills to do the same thing with your team. It's about having conflict resolution skills, because there's always going to be some kind of tension or conflict when it comes to putting together a roadmap. So the thing is, though, well, that all seems to make sense, that there's this intrinsic tie between technical and human skills. When I look around at what our community is talking about, it's often very focused on the technical skill side, right? We talk a lot about product roadmaps. We talk a lot about creating really good OKRs and MVPs and how to do customer interviews and A/B testing. It's a lot of the technical side of things. And again, it's not that that's bad at all, but by focusing on the technical skills with kind of this laser focus, we're missing a huge opportunity and potential to grow in different ways, as individuals, as teams, as organizations, and offering something and taking kind of a different slant on how we can offer something that's really going to be desirable and delightful to our customers. So here's just a few pieces of research that kind of shows the importance and impact that different types of human skills and different components of emotional intelligence can have on us and our teams and our organizations. So, for example, research shows that people with high levels of EQ make about $29,000 more a year than people in a similar role with lower levels of EQ. And that research was done a few years ago now, so I bet that number is even bigger. But it's just interesting that there's a financial value, apparently, to having that human skill as an individual. From a team perspective, teams with high levels of self-awareness, and teams can have self-awareness, believe it or not, it can be measured, have higher levels, or they're able to make decisions better, they're able to coordinate their work better, and they're able to deal with conflict better. They're really higher performing teams. And organizations with higher levels of empathy tend to be able to learn at a better pace, at a better rate, because they're open to new ideas. They're focused on building really good, healthy, and well relationships. As such, their product innovation rate is better. And there's a direct relationship to having better financial value as an organization overall. And that's directly related to having a higher level of empathy within the teams and with the leadership and the organization overall. So the work that I've been doing, and what I talk about in the book and what I talk about in all of these conversations I've been having over the past year, is how can we start to shift and create a more balanced product practice that's not so laser focused on technical skills, but brings in more space and more room for conversations around human skills. The diagram in front of you is kind of, it's not based on real evidence, but it's based on feel, I guess you could say. That today, when I look at our blogs and I look at the talks that we're having, and I look at the videos and the podcast, a lot of it's about technical skills. If we can move that and actually start to bring in human skills as an integral part of the product practice, even having a balance of 50-50, I would be very happy. A lot of the conversations I've had recently with different groups have mentioned that, isn't it human skills are actually even more important, say 80% or 90% of our jobs as we get more into a leadership role. So shouldn't that product practice actually be more skewed towards human skills? And I think that's very true. But for now, if I can help to create kind of a more balanced conversation around the importance of technical skills and human skills within product management, I'm feeling pretty good. So this concept, or this focus on human skills and product management, is what I have called product EQ. And in trying to kind of make that concept and that name more kind of known and recognized, what I've realized is I think one of the reasons that we don't talk more about different human skills like emotional intelligence and empathy and self-awareness and things like that is that we don't know how to comfortably and confidently talk about them and actually incorporate them into how we think about our people and our teams and our businesses and the people that we're hiring. I have found actually that one of the good entry points to actually try to almost operationalize product EQ and bring it into a system and something we focus on quite often in product management is through hiring. I don't know about all of you, but in the past when I've done hiring for product people at any level, there's always been a focus on a couple of main things. One, pedigree, which is, where did this person maybe work last? Where have they gone to school? Where are they from? Where do they live? Who do they know? So that makes up a big part of kind of what we look for in hiring. But then also there's just this really specific focus on technical skills. If I see a resume or a CV with a big focus on OKRs, somebody's has focused quite a bit on OKRs, they've introduced it to their team and their organization. The CV says they've had a lot of success at that. And I feel like that's what my company needs. I'm going to have an immediate interest. So by doing this, we're not giving ourselves a chance to really, by being so focused on technical skills and pedigree, we're not giving ourselves a chance to really incorporate this idea of human skills and bring that into how we think about hiring. So one other thing before I jump into how we can start to change that is I want to talk about how important hiring is. And the fact that it's often something that's it's not talked about as much, it's not considered as much within our community, within our craft. It's something that we do, because we find we need some more help, we need an extra set of hands, we need a new specialty, maybe we need a new layer of management or experience. But beyond that, it's not something that we often take a really mindful and considered approach to. And the results of that is often we make hiring mistakes. Often we're not bringing in the right people. And often even as a candidate, we're not accepting the right job offers, right? And that shows in some of the costs that are related to hiring mistakes. So on average, when somebody leaves, for whatever reason, that turnover to replace that person is going to cost about 120 to 200% of their annual salary. That's a lot of money. And getting that new person on board and kind of getting them up to kind of running at a good rate and feeling comfortable and confident at what they do takes on average about 13 months. So there's a big time and financial impact to making hiring mistakes. But the one thing that I find really interesting is research says that only 11% of people leave a job is because they lack the technical skills to do the job, right? So these numbers are not because somebody can't tick a box on a certain kind of criteria, on a certain technical skill criteria. It's because basically I feel like we're missing an opportunity, and we're missing the capability of focusing on something besides technical skills. And that's where the human skills again come in. So I'm going to share with you 3 things that you can do to start to hire for human skills. The first is to build a role that matters. So when I was kind of a young hustling head of product and product leader working full-time in organizations, I remember when I would get approval for new headcount, it was a magical day. It was, almost like Christmas has come early or my birthday or something, because that meant I could bring in somebody and give them some of the work that maybe I was done working on and I can move on to other things. It was always very exciting. And I'd take my laptop and I'd go look at other kind of industry leaders and see how they're describing similar roles, right? So I'd go to Amazon or Google or, whoever was big in the industry at the time. And I'd cut and paste different things from their job description that I thought sounded interesting and were probably kind of applicable to what my job was all about. So the first pass, and often, what became a final pass of a job description was cut and pasted together, based on what I'd seen from others. And during the research book, I found that I wasn't alone in that action and that behavior. It turned out that a survey said that about 80% of hiring managers, while they say that job descriptions are like super important, 50% of them cut and paste them together, right? So what happens is we develop kind of patterns of very traditional and very overworked and ill-conceived and ill-considered job descriptions, kind of like the one that I have on the slide here. This is an actual job description for an e-commerce product manager. And it's broken down in the very traditional must-haves at the top and nice-to-haves at the bottom. And when you think about it, the must-haves are usually technical skills, and nice-to-haves are usually the human skills, right? So we're creating kind of a hierarchy right there. And I thought this job description was especially interesting, and it really proves the point that most likely whoever put this together didn't really think about the job, right? Didn't really think about the audience that they were trying to attract to the job, but instead was trying to send a message at how disciplined and how good or kind of excelling their organization is. So if we look at it for a second, so again, e-commerce product manager is the job description, which pretty much, mid-level job. And they want this candidate to have proven work experience in B2C product management, proven track record of managing all aspects of a successful product through its entire life cycle, proven ability to develop products and marketing strategies and communicate them to the executive team. And it'd be great if you also had a solid technical background. So I don't know about you, but at an e-commerce product level, I don't know a lot of people that have that proven track record to go into this interview and to apply for this job with a good level of confidence, right? So it doesn't feel very realistic. Also, as a candidate, it kind of makes me feel that the organization itself is saying that this is probably not a place where I can learn and grow, right? I got to go in all guns blazing from the word go, and say, I can do all this. I've done it in the past. I'll show you I can do it again. Puts a lot of pressure on the candidate, puts a lot of pressure on the organization. At the end of the day, I don't think it's realistic. But moving on to their nice to have section, which I think is almost even more interesting. The first bullet is comfortable with ambiguity. And I know in product management that we cut and paste job descriptions, because I would say probably 7 out of 10 of all job descriptions in the nice to have section start with comfortable with ambiguity, right? You remain unfazed when you have to do things you've never done before. Moving on from that, as an e-commerce product manager, it'd be great if you were a natural born leader, right? So I don't know about many of you at an e-commerce level or even an executive level that could say they're a natural born leader. No training, no coaching, no development. They just come out of the womb ready to lead. Beyond that, this job description calls for you to be anti-fragile, right? So again, I matched the nice to haves with the must to haves, and I feel like they haven't considered this job description in a way that's looking for a real person. Instead, they've built up expectations and they're looking for a unicorn, right? This person for this role, I don't think exists. So instead of going and cutting and pasting and putting together a job description with must-haves and nice-to-haves right off the bat, what I encourage teams to do is to use something called the role canvas. And the role canvas asks 4 really seemingly simple questions. What's the purpose of the role? Why does the role exist? What are the accountabilities? What are the goals and the outcomes that the role is going to be working towards? Okay. And then what are the human skills and the technical skills that are essential to meet those accountabilities and achieve the purpose of the role? And with human skills, this is an interesting way to actually identify or to actually get to know human skills a bit more and get to know within your organization what's really important, and especially within this role. I often tell the story of one client I worked with early on with the role canvas, and they wrote down under human skills just emotional intelligence. Well, you've already seen from one slide that that can mean a lot of things. So you need to dig deep. You need to start to understand and use this as an opportunity to understand what's really important. What in emotional intelligence is kind of significant to this role. So it could be conflict resolution. Maybe your team's going through a lot of tension lately or has some really challenging stakeholders. It could be empathy and having somebody that can really build a reputation as being an empathetic leader. So the idea with the role canvas is you could, as a hiring manager, you can take a first pass at this on your own and then bring it to your team and share it with them. Or better yet, do it as a group workshop. And it can be done virtually. You can go to my website and download a copy of this, where you work through this together. And as you do, you'll find that there's going to be gaps and some overlaps and what you thought the role was going to be, and actually what already exists perhaps in the organization and what you need this role to be. So it's a really interesting opportunity when you do this with a team. With your team, it could include some stakeholders, it could include your managers, it could include recruiters, even if you've got recruiters helping you with this, to all come together and get aligned by answering these 4 questions before you put together a job description and make this kind of an iteration tool. So the role canvas is one way that you can start to incorporate human skills into how you think about the role itself before you start hiring. The second thing you can do is prepare meaningful questions. So I remember when I was working full-time as a head of product, and I'd have an interview coming up. One of the things that I would do maybe 5 minutes before is I'd go and I'd Google, brain teaser interview questions. And I'd find something like this. What do you think has more advertising potential in Boston, a flower shop or a funeral home? Or design evacuation plan for the building. And I remember feeling so smug as I'd go into these interviews, because I'm like, I'm really going to trip them up. I'm really going to see what they've got, right? But looking back, the only thing I really learned from asking these questions is maybe how this candidate would handle working in ambiguity, right? That first bullet point in the nice to have, not much more. These questions do not really tell me if this person can actually align with some of the different human and technical skills that I've called out in my role canvas. So instead of asking these brain teaser questions that we all love to hate, I encourage people to start asking behavioral-based interviewing questions. Behavior-based interviewing questions are really seemingly simple questions, not meant to trick, not meant to throw people off, but they actually have the highest validity of all interviewing tools, according to a study from Michigan State University. Because what they do is they ask a very simple question that helps you understand how somebody maybe has behaved in a work situation in the past, which can help you understand how they might behave in a situation going forward. So for example, let's say on your role canvas, you decide that conflict resolution is something that's really essential to this new role. You've got some really challenging stakeholders, and you'd like to have somebody that is comfortable in dealing with them and conflict. So ask them in the interview, tell me about a time when you suggested something that someone disagreed with. What did you say? How did you handle the situation? Okay, so again, not meant to trick, not meant to throw anybody off, meant to be a very simple question about a very realistic situation, something that has definitely happened. In fact, I could say this situation's probably happened to me about twice already today. So these type of questions really help you get to the heart of a behavior versus how somebody might put together an evacuation plan, something more valuable and relating back to the human skills that you're searching for. Another example for conflict resolution. Have you ever encountered someone at work who was unreasonable? What did you say? Again, very simple question, right? And the thing is, I think the real challenge with behavior-based interview questions is that it puts the onus on the interviewer to actually listen and to probe and to nudge and to get enough information from the narrative that you're hearing from the candidate to make something as intangible as conflict resolution tangible. So we bring in our interviewing skills here. We find out not just, how comfortable are you with conflict, but how do they react to it? When there's conflict, do they engage or do they walk away? If they engage, how do they engage? Do they try to set it up so that everybody feels like a winner or that there's a winner and a loser? And you take that information with you and after the interview and do reflections to see how would this align with what you're looking for in your role, with your role canvas. Is this something that would align well to the role you designed or not? One other thing we have to remember with behavior-based questions is that humans do have the possibility for change, right? We can change our behavior if we want to. So when you're asking the question, when you're hearing how somebody responded to a situation at work in the past, also listen to see if they're saying they want to do it differently next time, that they change next time, right? Because that tells you a lot about where they're going and what the behavior may be more likely to be going forward. I've mentioned just two behavior-based questions, but if you'd like to dig into behavior-based interviewing, there's a great book called The EQ Interview, where Adele Lynn goes through all these different competencies of emotional intelligence and lists out some behavior-based questions, the rationale and what you should look for. So I highly recommend that book, just to say. The last thing I'm going to share with you on how to bring human skills into your hiring process is to reflect and respond. So when I ask a client to draw out for me their hiring process, when we first start working together, it's usually something like this. It starts with the job description and it ends with the offer, right? It's a very linear process. And my response usually is, so when's the last time you did anything in product management that was a linear process? Things just don't work that way, right? We know that. Instead, in product, we know that there's opportunities to learn and pivot and iterate all the time. So we need to bring that into our hiring process as well. In the book, I talk about a few different techniques that you can use. One's called a calibration meeting, which is something that you schedule as part of your hiring process, bringing the hiring team together on a regular basis to really reflect. How are we doing? What kind of responses to the questions are we getting? Are we asking, do we need to look at our questions and maybe change that up a bit? Are we realizing that the role itself isn't quite what we expected and we need to go back and change that role and maybe change the job description? The important part here is to actually kind of schedule in some of this time so that your team is coming back together and realizing that you're going to need to change and iterate, maybe something as significant as what is the role itself and what are you looking for from human skills and technical skills or accountabilities within that role. So make that space for change and have that mindset of realizing that it's not going to be a linear process. The other thing I encourage is something called a role retro. So that's about 6 months, say, after the person, you filled the role, you've onboarded, the person's in action, they're doing their job. And it's bringing together the hiring team together. It's bringing together the hiring team and the person who you brought on to take a look at your role again, the role canvas, and really saying, how did we do? Now, this isn't like a personal development retrospective at all for the person who's in that role. That feedback should come, frequently and in, regular intervals. This is more looking at the role, looking at your hiring process and how you do, and evaluate, going back and finding out what could we have done differently? What did we maybe not capture that this person's actually doing this role? How can we learn? How can we continue to steer towards creating a good role? One tidbit that I think is interesting as well, and I talk about this in the book, is creating kind of a metric that helps you continually steer towards creating good roles and good hiring decisions. That was inspired by Jack Welch, of course, the former CEO of GE. And he had something called the hiring batting average. And of course, came from American baseball and the batting average there. But basically, before his team, anyone on his team, made a hiring decision, he went around and asked every individual what they thought, if this was a good hire, if they should keep looking, what it was, what their standpoint was and their perspective was. And then about a year later, he'd go back and kind of check in and see how they did. And he'd create a metric around that helped kind of nudge and drive the team to actually make a good hiring decision, because they realized they were being measured on it. It was going to be revisited. It wasn't something to just take lightly and leave behind. So I'm hoping that through just these 3 points, that you're getting you kind of get a flavor of what I talk more about in the book, and that hiring itself is not just maybe, you know, this linear process that we get through in order to bring some more hands on board, but it's actually something that can help create some change within your team and your organization, because you're bringing in human skills. You're thinking about it differently, and how you're building the role, how you evaluate that role in interviews with behavior-based questions, and how you reflect and respond by having kind of continuous points of learning and planning for that. So at the end of the day, we're creating more of a learning loop than that continuous or than that linear process. One last takeaway, though, is if you're going to try to hire for human skills, you kind of have to have it yourself, right? You can't see it unless you have it. So that's where it's a good opportunity, and even going through a hiring process and hiring for human skills, to start to learn about it, to start to take note of, you know, what is self-awareness to you? What is empathy to you? How can you learn and grow in that direction as well as you go through this kind of process? And this is really just the start of the conversation. Again, there's much more in the book, which has gotten some great reviews from Marty Kagan and Martin Erickson and others. And I also not only work with hiring, but across all sorts of product leadership and leadership team challenges with human skills. And you can find out much more about that on my website. And I think that is about it for me. You can please keep in touch. That's it. Thank you. Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks, Kate. Can you hear us?
I can. And I can now see you.
Okay, I'll step out the way so you can still see the audience. And we've got 3 questions. First one that came in is there a place for non-technical product managers, or should non-technical product managers try and become technical?
Can you say that again, please?
Is there a place for non-technical product managers, or should non-technical product managers try and become technical?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, to be honest. If the person who asked that can give us a bit more context, that would be great.
Who?
Sorry, I might not phrase it correctly. Can you hear me here?
I'll tell you what, do you want to come up to the front, and then you'll probably... Camera's here. If you speak.
Hey there, how are you?
Can you hear me from here?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, I think I probably phrased it really badly as I was listening. I can't multitask clearly. I was going to say that as a non-technical product manager, do you think the future of product management should be that we should have some form of technical abilities? Or do you think, is there a place for non-technical product managers in the workplace? That's my question, I guess. Oh,
absolutely. And by technical, do you mean like a certain kind of technology, or a certain kind of software? Can you explain to me what you mean by technical?
Sure. So I work with APIs. I don't really have that much background with APIs. Would you say someone like me should, I guess, work along, have the code base to understand APIs in that sense, or should I be kind of hands off? That's the question.
Oh, I think, a lot of it depends on what you're interested in. If you're interested in it, then yeah, definitely learn about it and go with it. But I don't know if it's essential to a successful career in product management to have that technical skill. I guess I've been in it 25 years now, and I can talk about APIs and I understand the fundamentals, but I'm not a technical product manager at all. So I think there's so much space within the world of product management that you don't have to do that. I think there's space to kind of create what you're interested in. And by all means, if you are interested in that, then go for it. But I don't think it's essential to moving forward in a career. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that was helpful.
Cool.
Thank you.
Excellent. A couple more, two more questions. It feels like human skills are not always the things that can be learnt or developed, but job ads often focus on the technical experience, e.g., must have 2 years experience in sector.
Yeah.
Which is most valuable?
Wow, what a question. Which is most valuable? Human skills, just so you know, they can be learned. There is so much science and research that says that. So be it from leadership to resilience to empathy to conflict resolution, they can be learned just like a technical skill can be learned. It's going to take a little more time and a little more commitment and discipline, because basically what you're trying to do is create a behavior change. And that means unlearning, you're identifying, kind of where you are now, unlearning that and building a new habit. And it takes a little bit more time for the brain to do that than it would to learn a new process for building a roadmap or doing OKRs or something like that. So that's why we often tend to go towards and lean towards technical skills, is because we can learn them easier and faster, and it feels good and it ticks those boxes on the must-haves. So I think, it's kind of a loaded question, because in my mind, of course, human skills are just as important. But what I guess one of the main reasons I wrote the book and I'm talking about hiring is because in product management, we do put so much focus on the technical skills with hiring. That is the bulk of what you find in a job description. That is often what you're asked in an interview, is to tell me about your last product release or project and what were the metrics and how did you get there and what was your process, and do a case study and things like that. So I recognize that is where the conversation is right now in product management hiring. And that might be why you're feeling kind of a pull towards that technical side. But I think as we kind of all mature, including the product community and our product practice overall, we're going to see that these human skills are so important, and even more important, being able to actually deal with a really tense situation with a stakeholder or with a team member, or what it is, it's just as important in your daily work as figuring out what your next set of OKRs are going to be for next quarter. So I understand the question, but I of course put the value on learning human skills, and they can be learned. And there's tons of research behind that. Hope that answered the question.
Brilliant, thank you. Did that answer the question, whoever? Yeah, who else? Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks, Owen. And finally, time for one last question. How can I use the role canvas to encourage more diverse applicants?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about the role canvas is that it makes creating the role, bringing the role together more inclusive from the outset, right? So it removes the power and the responsibility from just the hiring manager from sitting down, or the recruiter even from sitting down and putting together a job description. It gets the whole team involved, right? So you've got different thought patterns, you've got different ways of behavior, or different ways of thinking and behavior going into the creation of the role, right? And communication and conversations around that, which I think, from what I've seen, helps to create often a more diverse role than you would have initially designed. Also, it does bring that focus of human skills more into the equation, right? So it's not so focused on what I talked about before in terms of pedigree and technical skills. It's not just about where did you go to school and where did you work last, right? It's about, do you have self-awareness, and how tell me about a time where maybe you exhibited that you weren't fully aware of what was going on with yourself, and how have you changed? Can you really live the values of our organization? And give me an example of that. So it changes the conversation dramatically from just being so focused on those technical skills to being also focused on the human skills side of things and the emotional intelligence side of things. And that in itself can make kind of the opportunity wider and hopefully more diverse and inclusive, because it's not just about where did you work, where did you go to school, what's your degree in, right? Or tell me about your OKRs or your last project and how did you smash it, right? How big did you smash that? It's more about their behaviors, their values, their beliefs that's coming into the conversation. So I'm really hoping, and from what I've seen, the role canvas can help to create a more diverse job description off the bat, because the teams involved in creating it, it's not just one person. It's not just cutting and pasting. Other kind of exclusive kind of job descriptions and traditional job descriptions, and it helps to kind of diversify the conversation on what you're looking for.
That's fantastic. Does that answer the question, whoever asked it? Okay, brilliant. Anyway, thank you very much, Kate. I realise the camera's there, the microphone's there, audience there. It's whilst it's obviously been a challenging year, and thank you so much for dialing in for this.
Sure.
Obviously, it's a shame. Obviously, we haven't been able to get you here in person, but maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, hopefully. So thank you very much, Kate. And
thank you. Take care, everybody.
Round of applause.